in short, if we try to highlight the grammar difference or the biggest difference between Mandarin and Cantonese, what would you highlight? I understand there's going to be a lot, right?
Ballpoint. Is it called ballpoint?
Bullet point, right?
Bullet point. Grammar, phonology, and grammar and phonology mainly, and also vocabulary, because you use different words on a daily basis. Some of the words, if you translate them directly into Mandarin, people are like, or sometimes they know the words, but like that's not how they're used, and you're like, yeah, that's how they're used in Cantonese. Haha, jokes on you. And then the phonology, the pronunciation is all different, like totally night and day. And the grammar is slightly different.
Any examples that you can give of
Right,
like
so-
the most common one? Let's say.
So in terms of grammar, there are the way you use verbs is different, because, like, for example, if you know Mandarin, then, or at least the basics of Mandarin,
That's my level.
but like as soon as you start learning, you immediately know that it doesn't have grammar in our understanding of grammar. It's fairly simple. And then if you say that you are eating now, then you say 我在吃饭, right? But if you say I've already eaten, 我吃过了, or 我吃了, you add this 过 or 了.
Fast, which means
Right,
finished, right?
Right. But in Cantonese, you add different words. So you will add words like, well, first of all, eat is not 吃, it's 食. And then you will add those words like 着, which means that you finished. Or you,
But will this finished in Cantonese will change if I do different actions?
What do you mean?
Let's say if I'm not talking about I finished the food, but I finished an exercise.
Yeah. So you
Same.
can say 食咗, I finished eating, or you can say 我寫咗, which means I wrote it, or you can say, I don't know, 開咗, I opened. But then you have words like 過, you have words like 緊, which is completely absent in Mandarin. Like in Mandarin, you'll say 我在吃东西, but or 我在想. 我在想 is a very good example.
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking. But in Cantonese, you'll say 我諗緊, right?
我諗緊.
Yeah.
So what's the but
or 心諗,
so again
or
you said some words in Cantonese which is absent in Mandarin, but those words also means finished technically.
Yeah, so they have the same or similar functions, but they're completely different words. And if you show them to people who are not Cantonese speakers, they'll be like, I don't know what this is supposed to mean.
But what will be the rule then? Like, what's the point of these words if the meaning is the same? It's just to enrich the language?
It's just a different grammar. It's just a different grammar. It's like, it'd be like asking, why is the grammar of English and Norwegian different? Because these are two different languages.
Do you know why these languages went sideways? Why they become different?
I have like a general gist of
just the drop of history.
Yeah, so basically, if I'm not mistaken, around in the Song Dynasty, which was like 2,000 years ago or so, 1,000 something years ago, people started moving from the Central Plain, which is now like today's Henan province and I think Shanxi province or something like that. They started moving southwards and southeastwards. So they finally they were settling in like Fujian and Guangdong and so on. So they were bringing their languages with them, but as this was happening for like hundreds of years, the languages in the north kept changing. So in the end, the people nowadays, the Chinese people nowadays, they say like, oh, Cantonese is better because it's like more like old Chinese, or like Minan is more like old Chinese.
So it's the south that stayed original and the north that started.
I wouldn't say it stayed original because obviously they kept changing, but they seem to share some traits with like older Chinese, which Mandarin doesn't anymore.
Interesting. And I also heard that Cantonese has a lot of how you call it, the words that mean implemented from English.
Yeah, but Hong Kong Cantonese.
Hong Kong Cantonese. Yeah. Is it different from the normal Cantonese?
Well, I would say both like Guangzhou Cantonese and Hong Kong Cantonese are normal Cantonese, but Hong Kong, it does tend to have more loan words from English, and sometimes like you will, let me think if I can think of an example. Yeah, not from the top of my head, but like words like
Mm.
for coffee and words for like I believe that
Products and technologies that been
yeah.
imported or something
There are
like that.
certain words that although it's basically the same language, you go to Hong Kong, you try to say something, or you try to use the word you learn in Hong Kong and Guangdong, people are like, huh?
Mm.
So yeah, some of them.
I also know that in Mandarin, the written Mandarin and the spoken one is quite similar. Where in Cantonese, that's the biggest challenge, right? Where things that you say and things that you write can be completely different. Is that correct?
Not exactly. No, you see, Mandarin.
You can see how well I was prepared.
No, no. There is some truth to it, but it's a little bit twisted.
Okay.
The spoken and written Mandarin are different. Spoken Mandarin, a written Mandarin is more like is what they call like. I guess they call it written Mandarin, but it's if you spoke the way it's written, you would sound really odd.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you write the way you speak, it's considered bad style.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
if you read a book in Chinese, you're like, oh, okay, I get the difference in
But people
phrasings and
don't actually speak like that.
yeah,
Or
no. But in Cantonese, Cantonese is what they call a spoken language. It's mostly used for speaking. You can write it down, but then I'm not sure exactly how much of the written stuff is written the way it's spoken. Like I know that some magazine articles may be written like that, but then I don't read that much, so I don't know. It's normally like if you go to Hong Kong and you take a magazine off a shelf, then the only difference will be that in Hong Kong it's written in traditional characters, but the grammar and the the lexis
Mhm.
will be pretty much Mandarin style Chinese.
But it should makes it harder when you learn, right?
It's harder for me because I have hard time sounding words out in my
Mm-hmm.
mind because I'd be like, okay, how would I say it if this is the way it is in this language? How would I say it in the other language? Like I'm a much more fluent Cantonese speaker than I am in a Mandarin speaker. But then again, if you show me written Cantonese, I'm like, I need
Mm-hmm.
to focus because it's counterintuitive for me to read in this language.
It actually reminds me that in Russian, and I'm curious if Polish has the same thing, that it's a very one of the biggest challenges is that the things how you write them and things how you say them is different, and it's not only because in Cantonese and Mandarin those are characters, but in Russian that those can be just letters.
Mhm.
So there's the word looks the same, but it's going to be a o, just one letter
Right.
that is different.
Polish is more user friendly in this respect because, like, I always tell people, like, if you can get a hang of how individual letters are pronounced, with some exceptions, then you can read pretty much everything. Whereas in Russian, that was a problem for me when I was learning Russian because I was like, okay, this is a o, right? But
Mhm.
it's the stress is on this syllable, so this is shortened to like the
Mhm.
ah, and then we would mispronounce words all the
All the
time, and the
time.
teacher would be like, no, this is how we pronounce it, and I'm like, ah,
Yeah,
crap.
but right, reading is the different thing. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
That's always even for the native speaker.
Yes,
Even
I would say Russian, objectively speaking, Russian seems to be a little bit harder than Polish is. They're both insanely difficult for people like English
for a
native
foreigner,
speakers
yeah.
or Chinese native speakers because grammar is just insanely complicated. But in terms of pronunciation, Russian tends to be a
But
little
it's
harder.
also what makes the language rich. That's what I
Right,
believe.
right,
Yeah,
right, right.
because this is a very rich language. That's why the literature and everything that's connected to the words it's has a very big influence because you can express yourself in a
Yeah,
very different ways
yeah.
and you can play around
And
with.
also, when you're learning a new language and the grammar is not as complex as your own, the language, the grammar of your own native language, you'd be like, oh, that's a nice
Mm,
surprise. Like it'll be easier.
mm.
But if it's more complex, then you're like, okay, I don't know where to start.